Hello again. Last time I left you with Socrates. Today let's talk about his pupil, Plato. Plato is the man who wrote down everything that Socrates said or thought or did, to the extent that today when you read Plato, we're honestly not certain if we're reading Plato or Socrates. The two are that intertwined. Be that as it may, Plato is the man. He's the one that everybody talks about. He's the one that has made a niche for himself as one of the great philosophers of all time. First, his name. Plato, as you know, is a nickname. It's not his real name. His real name is Aristocles. But if you say Aristocles, nobody knows what you're talking about. That's, who is that? You say Plato, oh yeah, I've heard of that guy. Plato was his wrestling name. Yes, Plato was a professional wrestler. Picture professional wrestling on TV. I don't know, maybe he had long hair and had some tattoos for all I know. No, he didn't. But picture Plato as a professional wrestler out on the circuit, getting the crowd worked up, and then try to juxtapose that visual image with one of the greatest philosophers of all time, and it just doesn't fit, does it? Plato just means wide. A dinner plate is something wide that sits on your table that you put food on. We talk about plate tectonics in geology. So Mr. Wide is his name. Now, where does that come from? Two theories, neither fact, just two theories. One is that he had wide shoulders, kind of a short, chunky little guy, let's say. Maybe he's just kind of broad. Maybe he looked like the center of a football team. You know how centers look? Centers are not tall, thin guys. They're short, very broad guys. They don't even have a neck. Their head just kind of sits on their shoulders. Maybe that's what he looked like. The other theory is that it was a broad forehead, that he just simply had a wide head. Maybe that's true too, because with all of the information he had stuffed in there, maybe his head was a little bit bigger than normal. I don't know. But the point is, it's a nickname. Plato's world starts where Socrates' world ends. Remember, Socrates was looking for the two types of reality. Okay, Plato agrees with that same premise. There are two levels of reality. And he said that's because one is in what he calls the world of ideas or the world of patterns, which is up there. And he talks about an up there versus a here. He definitely separates the two. And he says that everything that you and I have began up there in a perfect form or pattern. What is a pen? A pen in my hand is nothing more than something that was created based on a pattern. That pattern is probably pretty close to what the original engineer had who drew this, but maybe it doesn't work quite as well. Maybe it doesn't quite click every time. I have to mess with a little bit. In other words, it's a knockoff. It's an almost. It's not quite perfect. Every car that we have out in the parking lot right now is built on a pattern, but you and I all know that some of those cars are better than others. Even though they all have exactly the same engine, exactly the same interiors and everything else, every car that came off the Honda, Toyota, whatever assembly line, now and again, one of them just somehow or other seems to go wrong. We call that a lemon. It was based on a perfect, it's not quite there. Plato says that's life. You and I are knockoffs of a perfect. He honestly talks about a pre-existence. He says there's a world, in other words, up there of perfect things. That's the natural world, and God makes those shapes, those patterns. And then when you and I come down here, yes, you and I came down. He says that we had a divine origin. That's interesting, isn't it? That we had a divine origin, and we had a better life before we came here. What our creation was, what our birth was, if you will, was when our soul, his word, came down and was put inside our body. Doesn't this sound fun? And at that time, God did a lobotomy on us, and we don't remember any of that anymore. And so in this life, we are searching for that perfection that we used to be surrounded by. One of the premises that Plato argues is that beauty is the search for perfection, if you will, in all things. And I think this is the fun one. Why is it that everybody agrees that certain things are beautiful and other things are ugly? Why is that? Why is it that you can look at at a flower, and I don't care if you're from Asia or Africa or America, I don't pick your spot, but everybody would say, yeah, that's pretty. Even if it's not a guy thing, yeah, that's pretty. And you look at something that's ugly, pile of garbage, I don't know, and everybody would agree, yeah, that's ugly. Why is that? Why do we all agree on basics like that? Plato says that's a no-brainer. It's because we used to be surrounded by beautiful. And the Lord God gave us just enough residual memory down here. He didn't do a total lobotomy on us. It's an almost, but there's just a little bit in there so that when you and I see something that is beautiful, we go, ooh, that's beautiful. That reminds me of. Or, ooh, that's ugly. That reminds me. We actually differentiate based on something that we associate with something that we used to be in heaven. That one's just a fun one for me. He says that when we see beautiful things, it triggers. Simple as that. And our life is a search for that. Our soul is immortal, and at death there will be a separation, and we will go back to where we came from. This life is going to be a study for truth. Why? Because truth leads us to doing good things, virtuous things. And virtuous actions are what life is all about. If you do the right thing, then you're worthwhile. You're a good person. If you don't, you're a waste of time and good air. What does Christ say? Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all else shall be added. Plato would agree, totally. He wrote a book about a perfect state. The book is called The Republic. It's a utopian view of what life could be like. It never was put into practice. It was never implemented. The whole concept of the Republic never did get off the ground. It's all theory. In it, Plato says that each person out there has three basic drives that make us what we are. Three groups, three categories, if you will. Once again, that kind of rings a little bell, doesn't it? The lowest group is driven by appetite. Appetite is nothing more than I want, I need, therefore I will do whatever I need to in order to obtain my desire. I would liken that to a baby, to a 2-year-old. They have no other concerns but self. They are driven entirely by self. Their world is me. Their concerns are for no one else but me. If they're happy, they smile or sleep. If they're not, they cry and say, feed me. That's the lowest level. The second level is driven by courage, his word, which helps us to be honorable against great odds. In other words, where do we normally define courage? In the Army, let's say, where you're faced with something that would scare a normal person. Okay, the people of that second level are people, in other words, who would do more than the average person would in that circumstance. They are better prepared, they are better driven, they are more loyal. And so we liken that category, if you will, to the Army, to people who are paid to put their lives on the line, to people who will die for their country. The average man on the street is not ready to do that. Back in the days, a long time ago, I'm a Vietnam vet, and when you go into the Army and realize that give it a few weeks, you could be toes up, that makes life very serious very quickly. And so he just says that the people of category 2, the courage category, are a little bit different than the lower group. His top category is driven by reason. And reason, he says, is the ultimate driving force to make a good person. Why? Because with reason, you don't use the body, rather you use the brain. This top category, reason, is the top category simply because your brain should run your body. We say mind over matter. We say there's a plate full of donuts. No, I'm not going to eat them all. I can eat one, but I'm not going to eat 12. That's your reason kicking in, where your body says, yeah, eat them all. And you say, no, I'm not going to. I'm smarter than that. That's the group. Now, he gives you some attributes associated with each of these groups as well. Let's start with the bottom one. He calls these the working class, or the iron category. Since everything is driven on appetite, they receive no education because they have enough drive to go out and get what they need without the needs of going beyond in terms of education. They can own property. They can acquire cars and houses and anything else that you'd like to put on that list. That's property, because property makes you happy. How much do you have? As much as I can get. What about your neighbor? What about him? Who cares? That's his problem, not mine. This is about me. My family, I'll extend it that far. But the guy down the street, drop dead. I have other things to do. This is my lowest category. They can have all the toys that they want. They can have all of the property. They can amass wealth. They can get all of that they want. But they're still the lowest category? Think about that in terms of today's world. Category 2, the honor category, the courage category. They get education because they've got to learn how to work with other people. The bottom category doesn't care about other people. Middle category works with other people. They can't own property. Think about the Army. As a soldier, Uncle Sam gave me all of the materials that I needed. The property, if you will, was given to me by the government. I had a uniform, green. I had boots, black. I had handkerchiefs, green. I had t-shirts. I had underwear, green. Thank you very much. If you need some more, we can fix it. What color will it be? Green. So everybody is going to be the same, but in other words, I didn't worry about whether I looked like the person next to me. Clothes were not an issue. Hair, they just shaved you. That was very easy. You didn't worry about hair from that point on. Y'all got a buzz, and that was the end of that problem. I had toys. Oh, did I have toys? I had some really big toys that went bang. I couldn't afford toys like that today, but Uncle Sam gave me those toys and let me play with those toys and do whatever else I wanted to, but they weren't mine. They were paid for by the state. All right. The middle category then is driven by courage. They don't have property that is their own. They can't amass wealth. There's no, what are you going to do with that in the Army? Everything is paid for by the state, and their motivation is honor and helping their fellow man. Third category, top category. These are called the golds. Plato calls them his philosopher kings. They are driven by reason. They, once again, have no property. They are paid by the state, and they are the leaders of the nation. How do these people get there? They're chosen. By whom? Other leaders who look around them and say, there's a smart one. Doesn't this sound familiar to something that you and I do every day? These are scholarships. If I have 1,000 people who come through the doors at registration, don't we look at scores? Don't we look at aptitude tests? Don't we look at everything else that is part of your background and say, here's a bright one, or here's a person who has pushed, here's a person who excels, here's a person, in other words, where my money would be well invested. And therefore, here's $1,000, here's $5,000. Let's use this towards your education, because if you are a well-educated person, I will benefit, society will benefit. The well-educated people are the ones who are going to help society be a better place for us all. Now, in the same sense, think about the church. Who are the people who are the leaders in the church? Are they the people who want to be the leaders? Heavens no. Ask any bishop that. Are they the people who are natural leaders? Yes. Look at any stake president. Look at any bishop. These are people who just come to the top like cream. They are the people who will always be the leaders of any group at any time, because people will simply look around and say, is there anybody who knows what's going on here? And someone will say, well, I don't know about you, but I think we ought to go do this. Those are my goals. Those are my philosopher kings. And Plato says those are the ones who rise naturally to the surface and therefore should be chosen to be your leaders. Because they don't have wealth, because they don't control anything like that, they have no vested interest. Now contrast that, if you will, with today's world, where presidents of any nation are usually some of the richest people around and control much of the wealth, control major corporations, therefore they can accumulate more wealth. They're in it for themselves. Plato's leaders were in it for the masses, and ideas and reason were what ran them rather than acquiring money and things. So did this work? Did Plato's great society ever work? No, it didn't. As I said at the beginning, this never got off the ground. It was never put into action. So what was the point of Plato's Republic? He said that any state will be successful, any state will be happy if the people in it are happy. And what makes people happy is if they can naturally seek their own level of happiness. What makes most people happy? Toys, money, food, cars, things. That's where most people are. And that's why Plato says most people are in that bottom category. There are some people who rise above that today. That's my middle category. And there are natural leaders. That's your top category. Plato says justice is nothing more than everyone finding their proper level. And if we would just let people go, people would seek their own level. That's pretty close to where we are today. Justice is what the Republic is all about. The nature of justice and what makes people happy. Plato believed that justice equated happiness. If you felt that things were fair, then you would be happy. And he felt that the three categories would lead to fairness or happiness because everyone would seek their own. Is that really true? In today's world, are people of the lowest class, the iron class, the things or toys or money class, are they happy where they are? What would they like more? They would like more toys. In other words, do they want to have the things that are in the top class? Some do. Some want to have the ability to direct millions of people or major companies, as well as the money that comes with it. But most people don't. Most people would forego the education side if they could just have the toys first. I like to tell classes, why are you sitting in this classroom today? To study the material, to get a good grade, to graduate, to get a diploma, to get a job, to make money, to buy toys. That's what life's all about. Toys for you, toys for your family. But to amass the wealth that this world says is important. Contrast that with Plato, who says all of that is secondary to what our primary goal should be, which is to accumulate knowledge. That's the only thing that we get to take with us. We will not have our toys in heaven. We will not have our toys after we leave. We will not be wearing the clothes that we have now in the next life because things will be different. Can you take it with you? Only if it's between your ears. Think about that.